Alright, let's get right into it. How on earth does a country with more oil than Saudi Arabia, a nation once so incredibly rich they literally called it Saudi Venezuela, end up in a state of just total economic freefall? That's the huge paradox we're going to unpack right now. You know, when you look at the story of Venezuela, it's like you're looking at two completely different planets. On one side, you've got the 1970s. We're talking about a dazzling, booming country, the fourth wealthiest on the entire planet per person. And then there's today, a nation in a deep crisis, with millions of people fleeing and a currency that's become almost worthless. The whiplash between these two realities is just staggering. So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How is this even possible? How could a country that is sitting on top of the world's largest pot of black gold fall into such deep, devastating poverty? Well, the answer is a fascinating and honestly a pretty cautionary tale. So to really understand the fall, you've got to first understand the incredible rise. And it all begins with the discovery of that black gold. Just take a second to look at this number, 303 billion barrels. To put that into perspective for you, that is the single largest proven oil reserve on the entire planet. We're talking more than Iran, more than Canada, and yes, even more than Saudi Arabia. This unbelievable wealth is really the foundation for everything that comes next. The 20th century was just a complete whirlwind for Venezuela. It all kicks off in 1922, when this massive oil gusher basically puts the country on the global map. By the 1950s, that oil money makes it fantastically rich. Then, in 1960, it helps create OPEC to get more control over its own destiny. And by 1976, it takes full control, nationalising the whole industry. It was an absolutely meteoric rise to global power. And all of this really comes to a head in the 1970s. See, global oil prices just skyrocket, and the amount of money pouring into Venezuela is almost unimaginable. This was the golden age, the era of Saudi Venezuela, a time of huge government projects, amazing wages, and this feeling that, you know, the good times would just never end. But here's the thing. Underneath all that glittering wealth, a classic economic trap was slowly being set. It's a phenomenon that economists have a name for, the resource curse. Now, the resource curse sounds like a total contradiction, right? How can having resources be a curse? But it's a well-documented pattern. So often, countries that are blessed with this massive natural wealth, they actually end up worse off than countries that aren't. They tend to grow slower, become way more corrupt, and are just a lot less stable. So how does this curse actually work? Well, let's break it down. First, you get this massive flood of oil money, these petrodollars pouring in. This makes your local currency super, super strong. Now, a strong currency makes everything you import from other countries incredibly cheap. And because of that, your local farms and factories, they just can't compete with all the cheap stuff from abroad, so they start to shut down. And before you know it, your entire country is completely dependent on one single thing, the price of oil. And this wasn't some abstract economic theory. You could see it on the ground, in real life. Venezuela, a country with incredibly fertile land, just stopped producing its own food. It started importing almost everything. I mean, why would you bother making it yourself when you can just buy it with oil money? The country basically traded its economic self-sufficiency for oil cash. And when your whole economy depends on one thing, it has this really poisonous effect on your politics. Suddenly, the whole game isn't about how to build a strong, diverse economy anymore. No, it's about who gets the biggest slice of the oil pie. The entire political system just morphed into this constant fight to control the state oil company and all the money it was making. Elections, policies, power struggles. It all boiled down to one thing. Who gets to control the fire hose of petrodollars? And that's when Hugo Chavez enters the picture. He rides this huge wave of popular anger right into power, and he promises to use all that oil wealth for the poor. And with oil prices hitting all-time highs, he did. He funded massive social programs. But, and this is a huge but, he also treated the state oil company, PDVSA, like his own personal piggy bank. He started prioritising political loyalty way above actual professional expertise. And this right here was an absolutely critical turning point. After a worker strike in 2003, Chavez fired nearly half of PDVSA's workforce. That's 20,000 people. And these weren't just any workers. We're talking about the experienced engineers, the geologists, the managers, the people who actually knew how to run the oil industry. They were all replaced with political loyalists, and the company's competence was basically gutted overnight. This was truly the beginning of the end for Venezuela's ability to produce oil. So let's just recap the situation. You have an economy that is 100% dependent on oil, and the one company that produces all that oil has just been hollowed out from the inside. At this point, all you really need is one big shock to the system to trigger a complete and total collapse. And that shock came in the 2010s. Global oil prices just plummeted, and suddenly the money completely dried up. But here's the kicker. Because of all that mismanagement, Venezuela couldn't even pump more oil to try and make up for the low prices. The government ran out of cash to pay for imports. Crippling sanctions made things even worse, and so they just started printing money, which led to insane hyperinflation. It was the absolute perfect storm. So the crucial point here is that with no other industries to fall back on, no agriculture, no manufacturing, the economy didn't just shrink, it completely imploded. And that's what triggered the devastating humanitarian crisis that has defined Venezuela for the last decade. So, what is the big takeaway from all of this? What's the lesson here? Well, it's that just having a ton of resources doesn't actually guarantee you anything. I mean, just look at this comparison with Norway. It is so telling. Just like Venezuela, Norway discovered a massive amount of oil. But the paths they took could not have been more different. Venezuela spent its wealth as fast as it came in. Norway? They invested it in a gigantic savings fund for the future. Venezuela went all in on oil dependency. Norway used its oil money to actively build up other industries. The results, as you can see right there, they speak for themselves. And this really brings us to the core lesson of the Venezuelan paradox. True lasting prosperity doesn't come from what you have under the ground. It comes from what you build on top of it. Strong, independent institutions, professional management that knows what it's doing, and a diverse economy that isn't hostage to the ups and downs of a single global price. Decades ago, one of the original founders of OPEC, a Venezuelan himself, offered this incredible warning. He understood that a sudden flood of wealth could be just as deadly to a country as a famine. It's a chillingly prophetic insight into exactly how a nation could end up choking on its own riches.